Last time, in the quiet autumn park of Havlikovisadi, two dogs met before their owners truly did. A King Charles cavalier named Cucumber stole more than a game. He carried off a bright yellow ball, leaving behind a golden retriever still searching for it, and a man named Daniel watching. For Evan, new to Prague and new to the rhythm of this city, it was the kind of moment that might have ended there. A smile across the field, a wave, a ball tucked away by accident. But some things aren't meant to stay missing. This is Autumn Tales, Chapter 2, Return and Rain. In this episode, a yellow ball finds its way back, a new routine begins to take shape, and when rain interrupts it, an umbrella and an unexpected invitation bring two men a little closer. The first day of work is never easy. New hallways, new names, new expectations. But sometimes, what lingers isn't what you did in the classroom, it's what waits in the bag you carry home. The alarm buzzed sharp against the quiet. Evan pushed himself upright, blinking at the pale rectangle of light stretching through the tall windows. His stomach already churned with nerves, his first day at the new school. On the floor, Cucumber was wide awake. The King Charles cavalier trotted across the boards, with nails clicking, tail wagging like a banner. "All right, breakfast first," Evan muttered. He crossed to the half-unpacked box, marked Cucumber's things, tugged it open, and pulled out the crinkled bag of kibble. The sound alone sent Cucumber into a frenzy of spinning paws and impatient yips. Evan filled the bowl, setting it down on the floor. The little spaniel dove in, crunching noisily, ears dipping into the dish with every bite. Evan leaned against the counter, straightening his tie as the dog ate. The apartment felt different this morning. Too big, too quiet, boxes still stacked like sentinels against the walls. When Cucumber lifted his head, whiskers damp, Evan crouched down to brush a hand over his ears. "Listen, today's a long one. First day at school for me, and first day alone in this place for you." Cucumber tilted his head, eyes wide, untrusting. Evan smiled faintly. "You'll have to get used to it, buddy. I'll be back before you know it. Maybe even with something better than kibble. Treats, if you're good." The cavalier barked once, tail thumping like a promise. Evan stood, smoothing his tie, then reached for his tote on the chair. He slipped his wallet inside, and heard a muted thunk. He frowned, pushed a folder aside, and there it was. The yellow ball, smooth, worn from teeth, sitting like it had been waiting all along. A memory flickered, Sunny nosing at the grass, confused. Daniel's voice carrying across the park, warm and steady. Evan sighed, slipping the ball back into the tote. "We'll return it after work." Cucumber wagged his tail like it had been his idea from the start. Some things you carry to work without meaning to. Nerves, expectations, or a ball that doesn't belong to you. The school smelled faintly of chalk and floor polish, the kind of scent that clung to old buildings. Evan's shoes clicked against the tiled hallway as the head teacher introduced him along the way. New faces, polite nods, names he might not remember until weeks later. When he stepped into his classroom, the room quieted. A dozen students looked up. Evan felt the weight of it, the familiar nerves of being both new and expected to lead. He set his tote on the desk and pulled out a marker. "Good morning," he began, steadying his voice. "I'm Mr. Parkham. I'll be teaching English this year, so I suppose today we'll test both your patience and my memory." A ripple of laughter ran through the room. The tension eased just a little. Evan smiled, scribbling his name across the board in bold letters. As the lesson found its rhythm, the nerves dulled. Grammar drills, vocabulary lists, simple sentences coaxed into shape. Evan paced the aisles, leaning in to check work, praising small victories. A girl in the back grinned when she managed the word through without stumbling. A boy up front whispered teacher with a Czech accent that made Evan chuckle quietly. It was familiar, comforting, even, to be here, guiding words into place. And yet, between exercises, his thoughts drifted. His hand brushed the edge of the tote, and he remembered the bright yellow ball tucked inside. He saw Sunny nosing the grass, Daniel's calm voice calling him back. For a moment, he caught himself smiling at the thought. He coughed, turned back to the board, and wrote out another sentence with a little more force than necessary. By the time the final bell rang, his throat was dry, his shoulders tight, and his notebook dotted with reminders for tomorrow. On the surface, it had gone well enough, but as he packed his things, sliding his wallet back into the tote, his fingers brushed the smooth curve of rubber still resting at the bottom. The ball was still there, waiting. Some lessons end with a bell, others follow you home, carried quietly in the bottom of a bag. The tram hissed away from the stop as Evan crossed the narrow street. He could have gone straight home, but the little bell over the pet shop door tugged at his attention. He remembered what he had told Cucumber that morning. "Be good, and I'll bring something back." The shop smelled of hay, biscuits, and a faint trace of sawdust. Rows of leashes and chew toys hung in neat lines. Bright packets of treats stacked in bins. A German shepherd barked faintly from a crate in the corner, answered by the flutter of parakeets overhead. Evan drifted toward the dog aisle, tugging at his scarf. He picked up one packet, then another. Duck-flavored bites, chicken strips. Something with salmon. "Too many choices," he muttered under his breath. "You're probably not picky, are you?" The shopkeeper, an older man with half-moon glasses, smiled knowingly. For the little spaniel, his check carried the lilt of English practice. "This one? Gentle on the stomach. Good reward for training." Evan accepted the bag, grateful for the help. The packet crinkled softly in his hands, already carrying the smell of meat. He smiled faintly. "Perfect, thank you." When he tucked the bag into his tote, his wallet brushed against the smooth rubber of the yellow ball. The reminder made his chest tighten. By the time Evan pushed back into the cool evening, the bag felt heavier than just kibble and treats. The park was quieter than usual, the last of the daylight stretching long across the vineyard slope. Evan unclipped Cucumber's leash, and the little cavalier bolted forward, ears flapping like banners. Sunny spotted him at once. A golden streak tore across the field, barking bright and eager, colliding with Cucumber in a joyous tangle. The two circled, spun, and yipped, as if they'd been apart for years instead of a single day. Daniel crouched near the bench. He looked up as Evan approached, tote slung at his side. Before Evan could even speak, Sunny pressed straight against him, nose buried deep against the canvas bag. His tail wagged furiously, paws shifting the bright intensity of a dog who knew exactly what was inside. Evan startled, pulling the strap higher. "Hey, hang on." Evan pulled the yellow ball from inside, holding it out. "I think this belongs to you." Daniel laughed, shaking his head. "Oh, I was looking for that." "Well, thank you." Daniel rolled it once in his palm before tossing it lightly into the grass. Sunny launched after it in a blur, triumphant bark breaking through the cool air, Cucumber hot on his heels. Evan crouched, tugging at his tote again. The crinkle of the pet shop packet drew both dogs instantly back, eyes wide, tails thrashing the grass. He smiled faintly, and this was a promise. First day of school for me. First day alone for him. Figured he earned it. Cucumber pressed eagerly against his knee, Sunny leaning close to, clearly expecting his share. Evan broke the treat in half, offering one piece to each. The cavalier snapped his up. The retriever took his gently, tail still wagging. Daniel chuckled. "If you keep that up, they'll expect snacks every time you show up." Evan laughed softly. Wouldn't be the worst way to make friends. Daniel straightened then, brushing his palms, and after a moment held out a hand. "We never actually introduced ourselves." "I'm Daniel." Evan hesitated just a breath, remembering the brass tag he'd seen, the name he'd whispered quietly to himself once before. He let the paw slip away in a smile, taking the hand. "And I'm Evan." Daniel's grip was steady, warm. Sunny came barreling back again, ball dropped proudly at Daniel's feet. Cucumber sat neatly beside Evan, still nosing at the treat packet. Daniel gave a short laugh, ruffling Sunny's fur. "Guess they're better at introductions than we are." Evan fed them one last piece, watching the two dogs chew side by side, tails drumming the same beat. "I think they've decided for us." And for the first time since arriving in Prague, the park felt less like a place for strangers, and more like the beginning of something. A ball returned, a promise kept, and the smallest kindness shared. The park was no longer just a meeting place. Slowly, quietly, it was becoming something more. The week that followed took on a shape of its own, not arranged, not spoken, but a rhythm that both men and both dogs seemed to trust. Every evening, just as the sky began to dim and the vineyard slope glowed copper in the fading light, Evan arrived with Cucumber tugging eagerly at the leash, and almost without fail, Sunny was already there, bounding across the grass as though he'd been waiting. The reunion was always noisy. Cucumber barked, sharp and high. Sunny answered deep and low, and then the chase began. Paws tore through fallen leaves, tails whipped, and laughter carried faintly from both men standing at opposite edges of the field. Evan would raise a hand in greeting, the kind of half-wave that had grown easier each day. Daniel usually responded with a small nod, sometimes a grin if Sonny had stolen the ball too quickly. Nothing more than that, but enough. The park became a collection of small moments, stitched together day by day. One evening, Cucumber launched himself headfirst into a pile of wet leaves, rolling with complete abandon until his ears and chest were streaked brown. Evan groaned, but Daniel's laugh carried across the field, warm and unguarded. Another night, Sonny sat perfectly still, muscles tense, eyes locked on the yellow ball in Daniel's hand. When Daniel finally threw it, Sonny launched out fast. Evan caught the ball, mid-flight, hiding the ball in his pocket. The retriever froze in confusion, ears flat, then bolted after Evan threw the ball, with a bark of sheer delight. Evan laughed so hard he had to bend over, and Daniel shook his head like he was trying not to join him. There were quiet moments too. A takeaway coffee steaming in Evan's hand, the scent of roasted beans curling in the cold. A faint trace of machine oil clinging to Daniel's jacket after long hours in the shop. Neither stayed more than an hour, but both always left later than they planned. And always, at the center of it, the dogs. Their joy made everything else easier. It wasn't friendship yet. Not exactly. More like recognition. A thread drawn tighter with every evening, until the thought of not meeting felt strange. Then came the rain. Heavy drops beat against the windows of Evan's apartment that morning, the sound steady and dull. By evening, the streets of Herzavis gleamed black, every puddle trembling with the weight of the downpour. Cucumber stood at the door, ears flat, tail swishing uncertainly. His eyes followed every sound of the rain against the glass. Evan crouched, resting a hand over his silky head. "Not tonight, buddy. You've got your pat. No point getting soaked for nothing." The cavalier barked softly, almost a complaint, then trotted back to the window. He sat with his nose pressed to the glass, watching the rain fall where the park should have been. Across the neighborhood, Daniel clipped Sonny's leash with practiced hands. Rain or not, Sonny had to go out. The retriever charged happily into the street, but slowed as the water poured harder, his tail lowering. He knew rainy days meant short loops, not the part. Still, his nose tilted in the familiar direction, tugging gently against the leash. Daniel sighed, rubbing his hood back from his face. "Not tonight, boy. Next time." Sonny looked up at him, drenched, patient, but unwilling. His coat dripped onto the pavement as though even his body disapproved. Daniel pushed the door closed behind them, water dripping onto the entry mat. Sonny shook himself hard, spraying droplets across the hall, then looked up with wide, innocent eyes, as if it were somehow Daniel's fault. "Great," Daniel muttered, grabbing a towel. "Guess less sleep tonight if you're damp on the rug." He crouched, rubbing the retriever's coat, working the towel along his back and chest. Sonny leaned into it, sighing, tail thumping even as his fur stuck up in odd patches. Daniel's voice soft, half a sigh. "Yeah, I wished no rain too, kiddo. Bet Cucumber's the same tonight." He smirked faintly, shaking his head. "Sometimes I wonder who's training who." Sonny pressed his head against Daniel's knee, sighing deeper. Across town, Cucumber winced softly against the apartment door, nose pressed to the gap. Evan lingered in the kitchen, listening to the rain beat against the windows. The apartment felt too quiet, the stillness heavier than it should have been. He rubbed at the back of his neck, exhaling slowly. Sometimes it isn't the days you meet that matter most. It's the day you don't, the absence that shows you how quickly a stranger has become part of your routine. Rain changes things. It interrupts. It delays. It breaks the rhythm you thought you could rely on. But sometimes it doesn't stop it altogether. Sometimes it only redirects the path. The storm that had kept them apart the night before finally broke. What remained was softer, a fine drizzle drifting down over the rooftops, air cool and damp, the paths of Havlikovi, saddy slick with fallen leaves. Evan hesitated at his doorway, umbrella in one hand, leash in the other. Cucumber stood pressed against the doorframe, tail beating a hopeful rhythm. Evan sighed. "All right, you win? Just don't drag me into the mud, okay?" The cavalier barked once, triumphant, and bolted ahead the second the clip released. The vineyard slope glistened with raindrops when they reached the park. Vines shimmered like glass threads under the gray sky, puddles forming mirrors in the stone walkways. And then, through the mist movement, Sonny came bounding up the path, golden coat darkened by rain, leash trailing just enough to show he wasn't pulling alone. Daniel followed close behind, rain speckling his dark hair. The retriever lunged forward the instant he saw Cucumber, barking with sheer delight. The little spaniel answered at once, and within seconds, both dogs were circling, slipping, shaking water everywhere, as though the rain had been worth it all along. Daniel lifted a hand in greeting, voice carrying across the path. Guess they didn't give either of us a choice tonight. Evan laughed, shaking his head, rain dripping off his brow. Not even close. The drizzle thickened suddenly, pattering heavier against the leaves overhead. Cucumber shook himself furiously, spraying water across Evan's trousers. Sonny barked once, ears flapping, his tail slapping against Daniel's leg. Evan fumbled with the umbrella under his arm, leash tugging, canopy catching awkwardly. Oh, come on. Daniel stepped in quickly. He caught the slipping leash first, his hand firm, then reached for the umbrella. Their fingers brushed as the fabric snapped open with a sharp thwip. Rain hammered against it, the sound loud, enclosing. Daniel angled the umbrella higher, stepping close. Shoulders met. Then almost naturally, his arm lifted, settling across Evan's back to steady the umbrella above them both. It was practical, necessary, but the weight of it lingered, warmth seeping through damp fabric. Evan felt it in his chest, as steady as the drum of rain overhead. The park blurred around them, rain streaking silver lines through the air. All that remained clear was the space they shared under the narrow circle of dry. Sonny pressed against Daniel's leg, coat still damp. Cucumber leaned into Evan's shin, waiting for the next move. The dogs anchored them to the ground, but the moment above belonged only to the two men. Daniel's voice dropped, quiet under the rain. They don't even know they're the reason we're standing here. Evan let out a shaky laugh. Pretty sure they planned it. Their eyes met under the umbrella, closer than either expected. Neither looked away. The rain eased, softening back into a mist. Daniel lowered his arm more slowly than necessary, letting the umbrella dip. For a moment, Evan felt the loss of warmth as keenly as the return of cool air. The dogs tugged forward, eager to continue. Evan adjusted his grip on the leash, and Daniel fell into step beside him. Their strides matched without effort, the sound of paws splashing through shallow puddles filling the silence between them. The vineyard rose on either side, leaves dripping with silver light. The path narrowed, forcing them closer. Cucumber darted ahead, nose to the ground, while Sonny lingered back, as if ensuring no one strayed too far. Daniel glanced sideways, a hint of a smile. You ever notice how they don't care what the weather's like? As long as we're here, it's enough. Evan breathed out through his nose, quiet. Might be smarter than we are. At the end of the path, the lights of a cafe glowed faintly through the mist-warm windows, silhouettes moving inside. Daniel slowed, Sonny leaning close to his side. His voice was casual, almost testing. You know there's a place just down the street. Dog-friendly. Good coffee. Evan glanced at him, curious. Haven't been there. Daniel gave a small shrug, eyes still on Sonny. We could stop in some time. Doesn't have to be today. Evan adjusted his grip on Cucumber's leash, a smile tugging at his mouth. That sounds nice. They walked a few steps more, the silence stretching comfortably between them, broken only by the splash of paws through shallow puddles. Daniel's voice dropped a little lower as they walked, his hand brushing Sonny's damp fur. How about Saturday, this week? Evan blinked, caught for a second between surprise and the pull of a smile. Before he could answer, Sonny barked, sharp, eager, and Cucumber yipped right after, tails beating like they'd rehearsed it. Evan laughed, shaking his head. Guess that's a yes. Daniel grinned, the mist softening around them as the dogs bounded forward, as if dragging both men toward the promise of the weekend. For now, it was enough. The path ahead, and Saturday waiting. And sometimes, the answer comes before the question even settles. In one apartment, a retriever shook out the last of the rain, curling against his owner's knee, with a sigh that spoke of tired contentment. In another, a Cavalier Spaniel settled at the door, tail thumping softly, still carrying the scent of wet leaves and promises not yet kept. Two dogs, two men. One city drying after the storm, Neither of them knew how quickly a walk in the rain would shift into something more. But tonight, the threads had already tightened under a narrow umbrella, and in the barked agreement of two impatient dogs. This was Autumn Tales, Chapter 2, Return and Rain. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to follow and subscribe to our channel for the next chapter, where Saturday arrives. Brunch is shared, and what began as coincidence starts to feel a lot like choice.